Well, ladies and gentlemen, Omar probably thought that this story was gonna just fade away. The pressure was gonna finally die down and she was all free, all clear. But now JD Vance is putting fresh attention right back on Minnesota. And for Ilhan Omar, that's a major problem because the scandal in Minnesota, from the moment it exploded, it wasn't just some local corruption story. It was a massive fraud scandal, large portions of which happened in her own district. Programs that were able to be abused for years by her friends because of the very political systems, the legislation that she authored while all of this fraud was happening. And so JD Vance is stepping in, leading the charge to find out what is really going on right here. And so as always, if you enjoyed the content, smash that thumbs up. That's the best way to let me know. Subscribe to stay locked in with all the future videos. And so first, let's start with the convicted Feeding Our Future ringleader, Amy Bock, who claimed that Democrats in Minnesota, they need to be held accountable for this as well, because they allowed the fraud to go on and they were not oblivious to what was happening as much as they're presenting themselves to be. Check it out.
Alert also in Minnesota, the convicted ringleader of one of the state's biggest fraud schemes is speaking to Fox News from behind bars. Now, she believes that the scam was no surprise to local Democratic leaders, and she's naming names. She spoke to Alexis McAdams. Hi, Alexis.
Hey, Dana. Yeah, so everywhere you look in the state of Minnesota, right, there seems to be another fraud scam. So this one involves Amy Bock. She's a Minnesota woman convicted of fraud for taking taxpayer money that was meant to feed hungry kids. But listen to this. Bock tells me the real issue here is the state of Minnesota, which she says kept giving scammers your taxpayer money even after they were flagged as fraudsters.
I have to believe that the governor's office and Keith Ellison's office were aware of this. They've said they were involved in helping the FBI. They've said they were made aware, but apparently I'm scary, so they couldn't do anything.
So Bock ran this nonprofit called Feeding Our Future. You might have heard of it. It was one of dozens convicted in this $250 million scam. You can see her mugshot there. Prosecutors say this group set up sham restaurants. They pretended they were making these meals. They got paid by the state for those meals, but they just pocketed the cash. Bock, who's looking at 30 years behind bars, tells me the state signed off on those businesses, not her.
It all went through a process. They were all approved. They were all paid by the state, yet all the fingers are being pointed at me.
And it's not just Bock. Whistleblowers told a congressional committee Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison there ignored warnings for years as millions of dollars and millions were stolen on their watch. Congress is investigating a long list of massive fraud schemes in the state. It's hard to keep up. Prosecutors say it's led to at least $9 billion in fraud, Dana, and counting. Congress also asking why the Attorney General there would meet with a group of Somali fraudsters, which were under FBI investigation in 2021. The group can be heard in an audio clip given to us by Bock's lawyer offering to donate to his campaign if he can help them get their funding flowing again. Ellison denies any wrongdoing here. He slammed Bock in a statement to Fox, calling her a liar, a manipulator, adding now she's on a media tour to deflect her guilt onto others instead of finally taking responsibility for this fraud scheme that she ran. So we reached out to Governor Walz too, Dana. He didn't get back to us. House Republicans say it's just getting started. They want to subpoena Walz and Ellison because they say they're responsible for ripping off American taxpayers.
It becomes hard to believe that leadership in Minnesota, especially politicians like Ilhan Omar, who proven herself to be well connected to her Somali community and campaigned at businesses with the very same people who were involved in the fraud, was somehow just ignorant to what was actually happening the entire time. This is what they want you to believe, right? But it's just a hard sell if you ask me. And Ilhan Omar also seems to have no words when confronted on these things. Take a listen.
Did you ask Minnesota Democrats to block the subpoena for the investigation of Feeding Our Future on the state level? The House Republicans are considering investigating Feeding Our Future now. Your role in it, would you cooperate with that subpoena and provide documents if they request it here in the House Oversight Committee?
And so now you have JD Vance, who has been leading a fraud task force, and he's announced that a federal investigation is targeting Ilhan Omar. Check it out.
Let's go. Is that Reagan all the way in the back? Daily Caller? There we go. Okay. I figured out finally how this seating chart works.
I want to ask you about the anti-fraud task force. You previously mentioned that Ilhan Omar seemed to have committed immigration fraud. Do you anticipate an indictment against her, an indictment related to that situation?
Yeah, so Reagan, I don't want to prejudge an investigation. I mean, you read the things about Ilhan Omar and about, who she married and whether she didn't marry this person or that person. It certainly seems like something fishy is there, but everybody's entitled to equal justice under the laws. So we're going to investigate it. We're going to take a look at it. If we think that there's a crime, we're going to prosecute that crime. And that's something the Department of Justice is looking at right now.
Mr. Westbrook.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Based on what you've seen during your work on this anti-fraud task force, do you believe anything should change about our immigration or refugee policies to stop fraud in the United States?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, one thing I'd say is that the biggest immigration fraud that existed under the Biden administration, it's not just that they let a flood of people across the southern border. That was obviously a very major problem and something I'm proud of the president for stopping. But it's also that they allowed the asylum and refugee claimant process to become totally fraudulent. And so here's what would happen, right? You would take a person who, in normal cases, would just be a traditional economic immigrant. Whether you let them into the country or not, they're trying to come because they want a better job, okay? They would come into the country and say that they were fleeing persecution, and they would say that they were an asylum claimant. And then effectively what the Biden administration would do is say, okay, you're an asylee, go into the interior of the country, here's a work permit, maybe come back in 10 or 12 years for your hearing on whether you actually have a legitimate asylum claim. So what did that mean? That meant that person was just completely given amnesty and released into the interior of the country. Well, what if that person was a criminal? What if that person actually had a violent history? We didn't do any of the work necessary to ensure that the people coming into our country claiming to be asylum claimants actually had anything legitimate or anything good in their background. So that is a serious problem. It is something that we have fixed in the Trump administration, but fundamentally that loophole, you're going to see sometime in the future somebody is going to try to exploit that loophole, and it's one of the things that we're very focused on in the fraud task force is making sure that the people who exploited that loophole are actually prosecuted for it, assuming they committed a crime.
This is where things start to get a whole lot more interesting, because you have the woman who was basically seen as the mastermind and defeating our future fraud. She's coming out and she's revealing that Ilhan Omar did not just know what was going on, ladies and gentlemen, but also helped make sure that the scheme was successful. And that's obviously a major problem, because for the longest time, Omar's defense has been that she had no idea, she wasn't involved, she was just representing her community. But now you have someone who was right there, connected into the scandal, pointing the finger directly at her, while at the same time you got the federal government opening up investigations. And that's the last thing that Omar needs, is someone directly connected to the scheme starting to talk. That could go from a public headache to a legal nightmare for her very quickly. And if an indictment ever drops, it would absolutely obviously be massive. But check this out.
$30 million the next time she's not. Also, there's been a lot of investigation into what she knew about these welfare programs that have benefited mostly the Somali community in Minneapolis. But here's the financial disclosure revisions. The original reporting she wanted for her tax returns was at $6 million to $30 million. And then she said, I made a mistake. It's more like I'm worth $18,000 to $95,000. Is that a red flag to anyone?
She claims it was a discrepancy. And the House, that's a big one, right? And I think it's a big discrepancy between $6 million and $30 million. Right. I mean, what is it? You should know how much is in your bank account, right? Or how much you're worth. House Oversight has now referred the House Ethics Committee to investigate her. She's facing this intense scrutiny now, and they're demanding answers. And some of them have been talking about subpoena. James Comer could use his federal power to subpoena her. They tried to do this at the local level in Minnesota, but she needed 6 votes. And they had 5 Republicans and 3 Dems. So the Republicans didn't have the 6 votes that they needed, so it failed. It killed the motion. But this goes back to Amy Bock. She made explosive claims. She is in a county jail, and she's the one that was convicted, the mastermind of the $250 million Feeding Our Future fraud scheme in Minnesota. There's her picture. Well, in jail, she was interviewed, and Amy claimed that Omar's office actively intervened, to sustain meal waivers when they were about to expire. And she says that Ilhan Omar knew about the multi-million-dollar scam and helped keep the program operating without strict inspections.
Bock tells the New York Post that she, quote, struggles to believe that Omar didn't know what was happening in her district. She told Fox something similar. Watch.
I don't know what she knew. I don't know. I know that I was duped by a number of people. We also have seen videos of Safari Restaurant giving out thousands of meals, pallets and pallets of food being distributed. Was there fraud? According to the DOJ and the FBI, yes. According to the jury verdict, yes. But how much? And why don't we know that? There's just so many holes and gaps in these cases. Ilhan Omar visited those sites. Why didn't the FBI?
Exactly. And when you have so much incompetence going on and that leads to fraud, you have to ask, is that just real incompetence or is it something more? Right? Ilhan Omar helped author the legislation that was passed that helped make the fraud possible, loosening the guardrails. That allowed these individuals, mostly from the Somali community, which she does not hide that she has strong ties to in Minnesota, to take advantage of the system, right? And so that is why, along with the coincidences that keep circulating around her, her name keeps coming back up. But this is also why you have some members in Congress, we're going to see in this next clip, who are pushing for legislation that only allows U.S.-born citizens to hold any political position. And the reason is pretty simple. If you are able to come into this country, gain political power, and your concerns lie more with helping people who are not citizens, then that obviously can lead to being a conflict of interest. Check this out.
Well, two things here. First, I've filed a bill to say that only American citizens can serve in Congress, not foreigners. And people think that's crazy. They're like, why do you need a bill to do that? But it turns out that we've got dozens of members of Congress that could be citizens of other countries that are also serving in Congress. Yes, they have American citizenship, but they may also have sworn an oath to another country. And you can't serve two masters. Ilhan Omar is one of them. She was a citizen of Somalia. She may continue to be. She certainly said that she prioritizes the interests of Somalia over the interests of the United States. This would say you can't be in Congress if you are both. As it relates to expelling her, we're awaiting the outcome of an investigation into immigration fraud. Did she marry her brother in order to bring him to the United States? If she did, it's a crime that should not only cause her to leave Congress, it's a crime that should cause her to leave the United States. And I know the administration is working on it, and I am as well.
So I'm gonna leave it here. You can call it incompetence, you could call it ignorance, but at some point you got to see more than just the people who are pretty much the pawns on the chessboard go down, or else this level of fraud will never end. And when you have politicians like Ilhan Omar, Tim Walz, others who basically hide behind the idea that, well, they just didn't know, but they also are the ones who implemented and put the exact laws and legislation and turned a blind eye to the very things that allow taxpayer dollars to get swept up by fraudsters, then yeah, accountability needs to be taken. And for someone like Ilhan Omar, it may go even just a bit further than her being ignorant to what's going on. She could be an actual willful participant, someone who did a little bit more than that. And that's what J.D. Vance is looking to find out. We'll have to wait and see if he's able to pull it off. That would be a massive victory, obviously, to be able to pull that off. But we'll have to find that out in the future. But now I want to hear from you. Drop your comments down below. I appreciate when you chime in. Don't forget, enjoy the content. Smash that thumbs up. For more, subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.